When it comes to aviation safety, it's easy to get stuck in an echo chamber. As pilots, we share the industry-wide goal of preventing accidents and saving lives. We can discuss, disagree, and debate with one another on the best way to achieve that. But if we're not careful, we can still find ourselves looking for answers through a limited view, our myopic view as aviators. So where can we look for inspiration? Our guest today is Loreto Moraga. Loreto has worked as an attorney specializing in aviation law for over 25 years. She served as president of the Chilean Helicopter Association since 2017 and president of the Chilean Space Association since 2021. In this conversation with Loreto, we'll examine aviation from a lawyer's perspective. How can liability differences between commercial airline and helicopter flights affect the mindset of pilots? We'll learn about Loreto's legal background in Chile and how working with the families of accident victims changed her approach to safety. Loreto will speak about her work in the Chilean Space Association and break down the safety lessons pilots can draw from NASA's Artemis program. And finally, we'll look at the bigger picture, how the insight of non-aviators might be just what we need to help prevent future accidents. I'm Bruce Webb, and this is Push to Talk, Episode 10, Expanding the Message with Loreto Moraga. Welcome, Loreto.
Well, thank you very much.
Tell us about yourself. So you are Chilean by birth?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah. Absolutely. We say in Spanish, in my country, más chilena que los porotos. We say I'm more Chilean than beans. Because my family, from my mother and my father, they were all Chileans. But, in Latin America, we used to be mestizos. Mestizos, a mix between Spanish descendants and native descendants. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And my family is not an exception. Mm-hmm. So I have my physical characteristics are very mixed between Spanish descendants. My name is in Spanish, Moraga as well. The last name is Spanish from Castilla. But my physical appearance is very like native people in Chile with my curly hair and the color of the skin.
And your personality is every bit as wonderful. You're very vivacious. Yes. And it's clear that's what's helped you succeed in your life. I mean, you're a very successful woman. You are an attorney. That's your trade, I suppose.
Yeah.
So tell us about that journey. So you went to university to undergraduate?
Yeah. I became a lawyer. I don't want to remember how long I got my certificate of lawyer. So long ago, but yeah, I feel so young, so I just forget. But when I started to practice law, I work in a law firm specializing in insurance. And they have a transportation insurance department. So I work there. And I work first with maritime insurance. Yeah. And it was interesting, but the industry really didn't catch me. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I had the opportunity to work with aviation policies. The industry was different. The aircraft were amazing. And I really started to enjoy doing that. Not exactly for the law that I was applying, was the same thing in maritime law, very, very similar. Mm-hmm. Yeah, also maritime law, or it's the origin of aviation law.
Right.
But the industry was so dynamic.
Well, it's a much younger industry too. Maritime law is from, I'm sure the 12th century.
Absolutely. So I really engage in that moment with the industry. And I feel that was and that could be my future. Just a feeling. A feeling. And suddenly happened something very sad. We have, not in Chile, in next to our country, in Peru, we have the biggest, terrible aviation accidents. The Fawcett and the Aeroperu, two airplanes crashed, and most of the passengers were Chilean. And the law firm where I work was appointed to defend the airlines in Chile. So the partners, they organized a team to work in those huge cases. The challenge of doing that in the side that was most difficult because you have to defend the guilty one, the airline, was really, really a challenge. We have to meet the relatives of the passengers. So it was a very hard way to know and study very deeply the aviation law and the aviation or the consequences of the hard part of the aviation. Yeah, so that was my PhD. I never studied a master in law or a PhD in law in aviation.
Right.
Never. I don't have any degree in aviation, but I've been working in aviation law for 20 years. Yeah, and now also a space law, but I have never done any master degree, nothing. Not the university, but that case.
Sounds like your experience was.
But those two cases were my degree in aviation, and very, very difficult because you have to manage not also paperwork, information, statistics, but also to manage the relation with the relatives. How you go after having a fair solution for each one. The situations were very different in each case.
Right.
So
because they're all individuals.
Absolutely. Well, finally, we worked there in those cases more than 3 years. And after that, we were very not happy, never happy, that situation, but satisfied of the results of the very, very hard work. And well, I quit the law firm. I wanted to do something different and start to work alone, independently, but in the same industry. That was very difficult.
I bet. 20 years ago, to be a woman on your own in the aviation law business had to be very unique.
Yeah. I think that I was the only one doing that. Well, I have a lot of problems to start. And well, I look for foreign companies, not local, in order to avoid some prejudice sometimes with women and women with babies. That was the truth at that moment. But finally, I could do it. I have clients that they trust in my experience, in my knowledge. Until today, they are still my clients after more than 15 years. I'm still working with them, so I'm very happy with that. And well, being at that moment providing these services, at the same time, some operators, they realize that they need to resolve common problems, and they create the Chilean Helicopter Association. And I, again, raise my hand and say, okay, I'm going to be part of this. Please open the chance not only for operators to be members of the association, also to service providers. They say, okay, that's true. We never thought about this possibility that other not being operator companies or distributors or manufacturers can be part of the association. So me as a lawyer and insurance brokers, for example, specialized in aviation, they became members. In that position, I became part of the board of directors. And 3 years ago, I became the president. Basically, I think, we need to ask the people why they vote for me. But I think they believe that I have maybe ideas that could be useful for the industry in Chile. And then I was able to lead that.
Well, and certainly someone who is a leader. I mean, I think you've proven that, as a young woman out of law school, working in maritime insurance and then aviation insurance and working on such large cases that you did. You don't get there by being demure. You got there by being an assertive, intelligent, articulate, communicative professional. I would venture to guess that is why the members of the association said, yeah, Loreto is who we want to represent our organization, to lead us. As someone who's sitting across from you, it's clear to me why they would want you to do that.
Oh, well, thank you for that. I think that now if I stand up here and look to the past, I think that one characteristic that maybe helped me or is important for any service provider in this industry is to get involved. To get to
really involved, not superficially.
Yeah, really involved. Understand the industry. Understand how works the manufacturer. Understand how is the operation and the problems that you may face during the execution of a service and the minimum safety conditions that you need to preview in the agreement you are signing with your client. So you need really to understand that in order to prepare a contract.
And I know to some degree you're speaking about a formal written contract, but in fact, anytime we accept a passenger on board our aircraft or a customer to do a job, we're entering into an agreement. It may be an oral agreement, but it's no less binding and it's no less important. If you come to me to go fly in an aircraft and I represent myself as a competent aviator and a safe company, and you accept to fly with me, then I have an obligation to meet your expectations, to meet my end of that contract. Clearly, you're someone with the foresight to understand this, but also the experience in law and the wisdom to know the importance of that, I would say, through your experience with the fatalities in that aircraft accident.
Yeah, well, after you leave that and you have a relation and you talk with relatives of someone who died in an aviation accident, your idea of aviation changed absolutely. Sometimes who are new in this industry and they feel confident could be really dangerous. Really, really dangerous. So never leave the confidence like your ego taking decisions and doing whatever. You really, really have to have in mind that this is a riesgo implícito, we say in Spanish. The risk is part of the day-to-day work. The risk is part. And when the risk is part of the nature of the activity, then we have some legal consequences as the nature of the liability that exists in aviation. Yeah, in the commercial aviation, we have a special kind of liability. Yeah, in Spanish tradition, we say responsabilidad civil objetiva, like an objective liability. We don't need to prove negligence. Yeah, because you have the action and the consequence, and you make a relation between the consequence, cause and effect, and you prove the cause and effect, and then you have the liability. You don't need to prove that someone was negligent
in their right.
Yeah, and that apply in aviation for a reason,
right?
Because the risk is part of the nature. Not only exists, it's part of the nature
of that business.
Of that business.
Right.
Yeah, so that's why it's ruled that way. At least in our legal tradition, that objective liability, as we mentioned in Spanish, I mentioned in Spanish, exists for airlines. So in that commercial aviation, liability in that way, very, very strict, had also created consciousness about safety because having an accident has a very hard legal consequence in liability. And then you have international regime of liability. But in the other commercial,
every other aspect of aviation.
Aerial work, where most of the helicopters are, doesn't apply the same liability system. Is normal responsabilidad civil subjetiva, subjective liability. In other terms, I have to prove an action, I have a consequence, and I need also to prove not only a cause and effect relation, but also negligence. So for a victim, it's very hard to prove that. Very, very hard. And that's why the liability works different between aerial work business than an airline business. And also that allows you to maybe relax about, okay, my liability is not really the same. So should I have to be that
Careful
or taking care about prevention or safety if I'm really not exposed as is the airline?
Mm-hmm.
So I think after some years and from time to time, that liability difference, at least in our system, had its consequences.
Right, a negative consequence on the behavior of operators.
Yeah, it's like incentivo perverso, we say, like a negative incentive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can understand that. Certainly, I'm far from an attorney, so I don't know. I do believe, I think it's on the back of the ticket. If you get a paper ticket, it lists, it's like we would say in this country, I believe, liquidated damages. It says on the back of the ticket, whatever, $250,000 per life,
super
blah,
regulated.
blah, 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 blah. Right.
Super regulated.
Right.
Related to airlines.
Right.
But it doesn't exist in aerial work.
Right. And, aerial work, the type of work we do with helicopters is by its nature, I believe, and again, I'm not a fixed wing pilot, but more difficult, more challenging because of the nature of the work. We don't take off and land typically at airports. We're taking off and landing from unapproved or unimproved areas. If you go to a mountaintop somewhere, there's no ATIS up there to tell us what the winds and weather are. There's no windsock or wind T. There's certainly no air traffic controller. The airspace isn't turped out for flight. So helicopter pilots, by our nature, are exposed to more difficult conditions because we operate in a more uncontrolled environment.
It's more on your own.
Yes, much more on our own. But we have a more intimate relationship with our passengers, I believe, than most air carriers, in that even in a large helicopter, the passengers are in your space. I think that for most of us that have flown helicopters or that currently fly helicopters, we know our passengers. We look them in the eye. We see them. We brief them. We load, unload. We have a real relationship with them. So while it's easy to think of people as a number, they're not. They're humans. And I'll speak for myself. I cannot imagine the difficulty or the burden of harming another person while piloting a helicopter or operating a helicopter and living with that consequence for your life. Looking someone in the eye and knowing that, maybe they're harmed because of something you did. And, again, as an attorney, when you first start working on programs like that, where you've got 100 decedents or 200 decedents, it doesn't matter. At first, they're just numbers. Then those numbers turn into people.
Yeah.
And I think for helicopter operators, one of our benefits is they're people at the beginning. When they board the aircraft, there's no cockpit door typically. So, I certainly understand. You're not isolated. Yes, we're not isolated. We're right there with them. And I think for me anyway, that's one of the things I loved about flying helicopters. You're directly involved in the work you're doing, whether it's passenger transport, they're with you, or you're doing power line patrol or law enforcement, whatever it is that you're doing.
No, and sometimes rescuing people.
Absolutely.
You are saving lives.
Absolutely.
In countries as Chile, for geographical reasons, the helicopter is very, very important and strategic.
Oh my gosh, Chile.
Yeah. Absolutely. So you are doing, not also you having this contact, very close contact with the people, but also you are providing a service that is so helpful in some places in the country.
Right.
So if you are not there, just for the reason that you are not there with the helicopter, someone can have a very bad consequence.
I remember I took off, we flew a ship we picked it up in Santiago, and we were taking it ultimately back to the States, but we were doing demonstrations, and we left Santiago, and I think, and I'm looking at you because I don't remember the geography that well, but I think we left Santiago and flew to Antofagasta.
Antofagasta, yes, in the north.
It's in the middle of a desert, which is like, but I remember we had dinner or lunch in a restaurant in Antofagasta, and there was no ceiling. There was no, we're eating, there's walls, but there's no ceiling or roof. the waiter or the person we were interacting with said, well, we don't need one. It hasn't rained here in 7 years.
Yeah. Well, Atacama is the driest desert in the world.
Is that the desert there? That's
yeah. The Atacama, and then it's the driest place in the world. So that's why also we have this astronomic position there of the cleanest skies of the world. The 70% of the observation done in the Earth is
from that area.
Yeah, it's in Chile.
Huh. That's
for
amazing.
That reason.
Yeah. Eye-opening for me to be in an environment that stark. I mean, when you're flying over that desert, you do not want to have to walk anywhere. I mean, even in a helicopter doing 150 knots, it's a big desert.
Yeah.
And
I know. And in the same country, and in the other side of the mountains, then you have Argentina, the Patagonia, huge place as well, and very difficult climate and very, very isolated. So the geographic changed a lot. In Peru, you have also high places in mountains. Yeah, Bolivia as well. The Altiplano is very, very high. And then you have the Amazon jungle, the forest,
right,
which is another kind of very challenging place to operate, to fly.
Oh my gosh.
So Latin America is like that. It's very diverse. So,
it is stunning.
Yeah,
Stunningly
it's
diverse.
beautiful. Yeah.
I think, someone check me, I think Chile is as long as the U.S. is wide.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And talking about so, as a pilot that, I grew up flying in the United States primarily. I've flown all over the world, but primarily I grew up flying in the U.S. I used to think 14,000 feet was high because, I know, you laugh because yeah, I can remember going through mountain passes at 18,000 feet or 16, 17, 18,000 feet. And it's the pass through the mountains, not over the mountains.
Yeah, pass through.
It changes your perspective. I believe, and someone again can fact check me, we landed and operated out of Cusco.
Cusco, yes, that is Peru.
Kind of the jump off spot to Machu Picchu. And I think Cusco was at 11,000 feet. That's the field elevation.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That's about 1,000 foot higher than any field. I think Leadville, Colorado is at 10,000 feet. So it's 1,000 feet higher than any field here. It's up there. So back to the type of operations that people do. So in Chile, can you give us an idea of the demographics of the operators you represent? What kind of work are they doing?
Well, a lot of HMS, sorry, the medical rescue and firefighting now is big season, because of the climate change. Now the seasons are longer and longer and longer. There's a lot of cargo with the slinga cargo, the
external loads.
Exactly, external load. A lot for mining. The mining industry is very, very important in the north of the country, in Antofagasta. Forestry is very important in the south. So external load is one of the most important operations. We have Eliaski.
Sure.
Yeah.
Law enforcement.
Yeah. Law enforcement as well, but not as much as we should. I think, and now the civil protection, the threats against the safety of the people now are a big issue in Chile because the organized crime groups didn't exist in Chile 10 years ago.
Really?
Yeah. And now we have really a big problem. Wow, that's a good question. I think more than one cause we have for that. But now we really have a problem with that. And in the pandemic, it was also very, very clear that we suddenly, after the pandemic, we realized that we live in a new situation where the threats of these high organized crime groups were everywhere. So I think that now the law enforcement is going to become a very, very important operation should be like that, mixing everything. We need to mix drones, helicopters. We need to do everything we can. We need for that because it's like a cancer. It's something that we have to absolutely. Again, about the aerial work. Basically, I think external load and HMS is very important, and firefighting also is very important.
How about flight training? A young person who wants to become a pilot in Chile.
Yeah, well, most of the people who fly commercial, they come from the forces.
Okay.
Army, Navy, the Chilean Air Force. So the training schools are few, exist because for private pilots, we have an issue there as well because we have a lot of like individuals, instructors, and the regulation is a lot more flexible and minimum. So now we are having like some more accidents in the general aviation. Then we should. Well, the fleet has increased a lot in the last 10 years, a lot. However, the number of accidents had stayed the same, which is a good news. Yeah. However, we have not been able to change that number. The average is 6 accidents per year, and 1 is fatal, and the average is 2 people dead a year. And we know that. We have not been able to change that since we set up the HST Chile working group. 2 years is not too much time, but we really expect, maybe the ambition was too much, but we expected that after 2 years we can make some changes and reach some of our goals, initial goals, but we are a little frustrated because we have not been able to change that. We prepare. We work a lot to have the first national safety conference a couple of months ago. 8 natural days after the conference, we have 3 consecutive accidents with 3 fatalities. So we were so angry, disappointed, frustrated. We say, no, we need to do something radically different to make a change. We are not reaching the people with our messages. Yeah, we need to really put together everyone, be absolutely convinced, and make as a part of our day-to-day job, assume this target of the zero fatal in a day-to-day basis.
So what do you see? Yeah, right. So how are you going to do that so we can emulate what you do? So
to reach, you have to discover, to use imagination, say, okay, what's the way, how I can become the messenger for this message for these people.
So that is what we need to learn to do as aviation safety professionals, to disseminate information.
Sometimes I have the doubt who should be the messenger, because me, for example, I'm a lawyer. What I'm doing here in the conference, in the seminar of safety, I was speaking and doing the presentation, blah, 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 statistics. And suddenly I look for the people and say, each of you have asked why I am here speaking about this, because I'm not a pilot.
But you have a different perspective, a unique perspective. And again, I go back to, you have a creative mind, and we need creative.
But sometimes I have the doubt if I can be someone that people can believe in the message coming from someone who is not living the risk.
I think
I don't put my body in the helicopter. I don't work there. So why people can trust in what I say in safety if I'm not even there in the helicopter? It's I think sometimes I have the doubt to say, okay, what I'm doing here in this topic. I have a different view, maybe, because I go after the big topics and try to manage the whole system, the HST Chile and the relation with the authority, and try to be strategic with that, like doing sometimes politics in the good sense of the politics, but not necessarily I'm the messenger.
Yes, but everything that you are is exactly what we are not. Helicopter people, as a rule, are not politicians. We don't see the whole world view. We see our myopic view, right? I mean, I think it's part of the reason we struggle to expand our safety message is because we see what we see and only what we see. And because we are immersed in it, it's all we can see. But you don't have those same constraints. You can sit back because you're not constrained by the everyday operation of an organization, whether it be a service provider or an operator or a pilot or a technician. You can look at it more omnisciently. And certainly 50 years ago in this country, and I would say even 30, 40 years ago, certainly 50, most helicopter operations in this country were begun by helicopter people, whether they be technicians or pilots, typically pilots. And quite honestly, they succeeded. They were wildly successful right up until the point they needed to grow, obtain more money to expand and things. And then they got out of their scope of competency. And that's when they began to fail. And that's why, many of these smaller organizations were either purchased by or absorbed by larger organizations that did have a more business mind or a more legal mind. So I would say that you fit perfectly in what we need. And I don't think anyone sits in the audience and says, what does she know? She's an attorney. I don't think that's happening.
No, I think it's happening. No. In Chile, we have a very funny word for this. We say we are the champions of a local sport. The name is chaqueteo. Chaqueteo is an expression. It's like putting out on your jacket. Chaqueteo is like taking your jacket and not letting you put on the jacket. Yeah. Doing like this with the jacket. Chaqueteo is going against.
Okay.
And you say, no. No, she can do like this in this topic because blah, blah, blah. And you do like a gossip. We say pelar. Pelar is talking in your back, behind you in your back, and say, no. Let's do like she's doing well, but she's not.
Well, just like we need to improve aviation safety, we need to improve that as well.
Absolutely.
Because
we need to be less hypocritical.
Hypocritical? That's right. That's right. Yeah. I couldn't say any word in Spanish, so don't be embarrassed by your English.
No, it's not about the language knowledge, but the pronunciation of the hypocritic.
Yeah. Hypocrisy. We don't like hypocrisy.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. And a lot of time, more than we should, the hypocrisy. Well, lawyers are very hypocritical. I cannot say it's more.
Well, I can't say your last
aviation.
name, so
more than in aviation.
But it is true. So you, and I do mean this when I say it. We, and when I say we, I mean you, are an example for others that to succeed in aviation safety or any industry doesn't mean a person who sells, I don't know, surgical supplies. Do they need to be a surgeon to be successful in that business?
No. That's a good topic. No.
You don't have to be. I mean, we just because you are in an industry that specializes.
Let me see an idea about that. It's very difficult to have mechanicals giving the message. Mm-hmm. They always think, and everyone think that a pilot should be the one.
Which is not right.
Yeah.
We all have a different perspective. A long time ago when I was flying medical helicopters, long story short, when I left the base, they needed another base manager and they asked who I thought should do it. And I said, the mechanic. And they're like, whoa, we've never had a mechanic be a base manager. And I said, well, he's the most qualified. He should be the base manager. And by the way, it makes more sense anyway because he's there every day. He doesn't go on and off shift. He's there every day. He's competent. Blah, 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 blah. Anyway, my point is, it just takes a paradigm shift. We have to open ourselves up, be willing to really accept change. And, perhaps it is unique that a female attorney is leading an aviation association. But the real question ought to be, why not?
Oh, well. Yeah, why not?
I don't think there's anything, in fact, I think it is fantastic. And I don't mean that as just a hollow accolade. I mean that when you look at what an association needs to succeed, you need that level of moxie, right? Political savviness, awareness, a little bit of cleverness, and I don't mean that in a nefarious way, I mean that in a good way, and a different perspective. We're so busy, many operators, so busy trying to make a living flying helicopters, we don't see what's obvious to you. And while I can appreciate you don't know all the answers, but you know answers we have not even thought of. You know answers to questions we've not even thought of yet. So that's why you're where you are, and I think that's why you're succeeding in what you do.
Yeah, maybe, and maybe I'm pretty concerned, and I'm really commit with this safety.
Because you've seen the people's eyes.
I have seen the people's eyes. I have seen the mother. I have seen a son. I have seen the daughters. I have seen the orphans. That who live after the parents died in accidents. I have seen them. I have worked with the cases. I have prepared the insurance payment for. So after that, you see that we need to have not only an industry, a healthy industry. Mm-hmm. And if we look now for the next generation of business, that is the advanced air mobility, mm-hmm. that is going to change completely the scheme of transportation inside the cities and close to the cities. We need to be prepared for that. How we're going to develop that? How are we going to do that mm-hmm. if we cannot change our mind regarding safety in the vital operations that we have now? Yeah, and sooner than we think.
Oh, we're already late to the game.
Yeah, we are already late. So that is my concern. I would love to have this eVTOL flying in Chile. We say, okay, but we have to be prepared. Not only, and when I say that, people say, okay, we have to look after the authorities to get regulation, to get traffic control technology, blah, blah, blah. I say, okay, that's true. But are we prepared for that if we cannot change our culture regarding safety in the operations we already have? We have a problem. Like this space phrase of Houston, we have a problem. Mm-hmm. Okay, we have a problem here.
Right.
Yeah, and well, I also lead the Chilean Space Association. And I'm really, really now learning about how regarding space, the concept of safety is so different. It's so different. And we have to learn a lot about that. And it is really like a contradiction mm-hmm. because aviation is absolutely oldest and grown-up industry if you compare with a space industry, mm-hmm. yeah, which is new. It's mm-hmm. brand new. It's a baby. Mm-hmm. It's a baby just growing. But the concept of safety is absolutely different. Mm-hmm. I was invited by NASA to come for the launch of Artemis. Mm-hmm. And I came like a month ago to Kennedy Space Center.
And it didn't go.
No, but
for
in
safety
that moment,
reasons.
Exactly. And when we were there with a lot of authorities, forget about the people who was there, was a little summit of a space agency. No, I was really, really doing networking full. Very happy with that. And suddenly they say, okay, this is not going to happened today. And now the director of the program, she's going to come here and explain and tell you about what happened. Okay. And at that moment, I was expecting someone that is going to be like the body language will show someone who was like a little disappointed of the situation and say, okay, I'm sorry, but we have to fix this. And we realized, and believe me, the woman I saw in that moment was in a completely different attitude. He was very satisfied. She was very calm, happy to say, well, we have a problem of this nature, and this is a test flight. We have to test, the rocket, the system A, B, C, but also we test protocols. We test how the engineers, or how long the engineers take to realize when we have a problem and take a decision. And our protocol state like we have 2 hours, or what we expect the time to find the problem and to make a decision was 2 hours. And the team took only 40 minutes. So we are very, very happy. This is a very successful. And I realized to say, she is completely right. When you think that sometimes you fail, you are not failing. It's exactly the opposite. And that is something that doesn't exist in aviation.
Imagine in our world, if someone walks out to an aircraft to go pre-flight, and they have a very important flight, or however you want to define that, and during the pre-flight, someone finds that one of the fuel lines has a fairly significant erosion to the tube, the wall thickness is eroded. And so something's fretted on that, and now that wall, the thickness of that pipe is compromised. And then the ship can't fly. People get all upset about that. Oh man, I can't, isn't there a way, but really the opposite ought to be true. Someone ought to say, fantastic, I'm glad that was spotted.
Yeah.
Because what if?
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, but someone has to communicate that in the correct way. And that is something that I think we have never managed. We have never taken care of that moment. We say, okay, according to protocols of safety, we realize this, and we have to take a hard decision. How we communicate that to the client.
And it's why I say you will help us see that. Because as a pilot or an owner-operator, when I see that, I think, oh my gosh, I've just lost revenue. I mean, my immediate thought is too, I've lost revenue. I've disappointed a customer. The customer may go to my competitor. I mean, there's a litany of things.
Always the answer. Yeah, always the answer is, no, if I don't do this, always is someone capable of doing this.
That's right.
Like a mercenary.
Right.
Always the reason is that I need to do this because it's 3 guys waiting for doing the same operation.
And it's a paradigm shift. We have to look at it like the NASA
and
director.
to say, I'm taking care of your life. I'm taking care of your operations. I'm taking care of your reputation. I'm taking care.
And it's just like, and I'll take it a step further, we have so many accidents where pilots, and again, it is pilots, make the final decision to take a flight, and maybe the weather is marginal, and they're not completely comfortable, but they believe, I do believe that they believe at that moment in time they can make it work. And instead of explaining to the customer and saying, listen, Loreto, here's the situation. The weather's very marginal, and it's likely that we could make the flight. But I think the risk is just it's too high. So we're going to go ahead and cancel the flight for today. And I know that's disappointing to you. And I know you're going to miss your flight back to Santiago. And I'm disappointed that has to happen, but that is what has to happen. We need to learn to be able to stand up and do that. And then quite honestly, as we look at the mercenaries or the competitors, however we want to define those people, hopefully those people will say, when and if the customer calls and says, listen, you call up operator B and say, hey, listen, Bruce he just ruined my week. He says he can't fly. I hope that customer B says, well, yeah, that was the reasonable decision. And instead of, saying, well, this is my opportunity to take Loreto from Bruce, it's an opportunity to improve safety for all of us. We have that power. We just need to exercise that power. But too often we're afraid. We're afraid of things that often won't happen. I've had occasion in my career to tell many people bad news. Listen, we can't go, or whatever the news is. And I will say with rare exception, and I would say without exception, but with rare exception, the response of the person that I'm notifying has never been nearly as bad as I imagined it would be.
Let me tell you this. Once I hear the psychiatrist saying more than the 90% of the things that we imagine that are going to happen never happen.